Well, greetings, everyone. And I wanted to take a little time today to spend some time with a remarkable woman and an ally of hers who have worked on a book that I think is really groundbreaking and important for everyone. And so we're going to be getting to dive in with Sister Jenna, who is one of the leaders in the Brahma Kumaris movement. She's also somebody who bridges realms of spiritual practice and mystical depth with very practical real world things like the politics of our nation. And she has really been somebody that I've looked to as a source of healing, inspiration, and just mystical depth. When I speak with Sister Jenna, I find that she is like a clear pool of mystical wisdom that just soothes and heals and nourishes everything that it touches. And so her book that has just come out is called Meditation, Intimate Experiences with the Divine Through Contemplative Practices. Just released on February 2nd, is really a very profound mystical offering to the world. So welcome, Sister Jenna.
Thank you, Stephen.
Great to have you. So first of all, before we bring in Charlie, I want to spend a little time with you and just share a little bit about what was your inspiration behind this book? Why are you feeling this moment to bring forward this offering?
I'm glad you asked. You know, what was interesting was when Sacred Stories Publishing reached out to me, Ariel, and asked me that she has this Common Sentience series of books that she's building on through storytelling to raise awareness in various areas of society, whether it's with animals or the nature and so on. And my book was on meditation. And she said, no one would be better to be a featured author and to lead this book but you. And I just quickly, Stephen, you know me, I go, I am not going to do a book on meditation. And there's no way this meditation book is going to really be so impactful that people are just going to want to learn to meditate. So I declined her offer, and she was quite persistent. And she came back a few months later and she said, Sister, I'm begging you. I'm telling you, this would be good. Can you share your experiences of God, of how you experience the divine? And maybe there are a lot of other people out there who have had a mystical experience with the divine and they want to tell the story, so you can also invite as many friends along the journey with you. And Steve and I did. We have like over 37 co-authors. And so I loved the way this book has turned out. And I love the authenticity of all the co-authors that really talked about that call, Stephen, or that awakening and how it changed their lives forever. And so the fact that it got released on such an auspicious day as February 2nd, 2022, and it has 222 pages, there is something mystical going on.
Moving from duality into oneness, all the dualities coming together. Well, I'd love for you to share a little bit. The word in the title that really jumps out for me is intimate. And it's something that I've noticed in how you talk about your relationship with God, Spirit, the Absolute. There's a quality of like almost a tender mother-daughter, intimate friend, lover kind of quality that is just, it's just like, it has, there's a sweetness that I think perfumes how you speak about this relationship, and the folks that you've brought on board as well. So maybe share a little bit about why cultivating that kind of really intimate, like personal, sweet connection with the divine is so important in this time.
I think with the dismantling of religion and so many organized structures and some old ways of seeing our relationship between the self and God, I think there's a big shift happening. You know that. And I feel that if we don't cultivate this awareness of ourselves as soul and link that to the energy of the divine, the supreme, then we won't understand the real power of pure intimacy. We're so used to intimacy between two individuals, but have you ever felt an intimacy between you, the soul, and God? So there's a chapter at the back of the book where I share my visit to Mount Abu, India, at the Brahma Kumaris headquarters, where I was sitting there and the trance messenger, Daddy Goza, came out. And the moment she opened her eyes, Stephen, and my heart was pounding out of my chest that I don't think I'll have this mystical experience with God. And as the moment I was about to get up and leave the hall, there was this wave of just purity and peace just went throughout the whole hall. And I just sat myself down and I remembered going, what is that? And that first experience of my intimacy with God has not left me. I'm not someone that really was ever a big voice about talking about God. I think it was something very private. And I think it was always my wish that at some point in time, my presence will reveal that I have a close connection to the divine, to inspire somebody, not to have them follow me, but to be inspired. And so I think that what you might sometimes feel when we do so many programs and projects together is that quietude that I've not allowed a human person to take over that space of intimacy between me and the divine. So that has stayed with me for almost 30 years. And I think that's what's helped me with all of my ups and downs, of my health challenge last year, taking care of Sister Gita with dementia, moving from my center that I was living with in 14 years during a pandemic. It was okay, all right. I've got my connection with the one. And so I think we are actually moving closer towards feeling safe with that level of intimacy between the soul and God. And I think this book gives you permission to do just that.
I'd love to hear from you a little bit about the practice. How do we cultivate a practice that cultivates that intimacy? And I'm thinking of going beyond particular religious forms or traditions or specific mantras, but there's what I've noticed in speaking with you about these matters is that there's a quality of sort of like inwardness that doesn't withdraw you from the world, but there's like a way in which your presence awareness is like drawing forth or pulling into a sort of a divine space that then you still are bringing forward, but there's a quality of your being that kind of being sourced from behind the scenes rather than sort of as outward focused as the outer world tends to be. And so I wonder if you can just speak about that as sort of an arc of practice, like what allows you to cultivate that sense of indwelling presence moment to moment that then you bring forward into how you engage the world.
Sometimes I'm very cautious in sharing the way I spend my day. Remember when you stayed at the ashram and I told you don't be scared if the music goes on at 3:30 to wake you up? And then at 4 o'clock, and then you might hear a bunch of us walking into the meditation room, but you didn't. You joined us in the meditation space. I would say, starting from just my perspective, I saw the proof of the transformation in my parents. That was one. The second thing was I was exposed to so many female yogis who were the walking embodiments of the proof of this meditation and study. And so what that started to do was to impact my mind. And I started to think more about how does that energy transform them like that? Where are they connecting? And so when I got the introduction of soul and God being a supreme soul and an energy that's benevolent, I started to practice trying to establish the connection, but my value wasn't so high that I thought I could ever be so close to God. So I think it took me a lot of time, Stephen, and it was through the study of Raj Yoga that gave me the intellectual and mental tools to put the pieces together of all the stuff we've heard with religiosity and spiritualism. It kind of gave me a very simple way of looking at my own journey and the transformation between me, the soul, and God. And I think once I started to feel that, then waking up early in the morning was vital for me to feel the intimacy between I, the soul, and the divine. And then studying, feeling that I wanted to hear the energy of the divine guide me, give me signs, show me the map. And then while I'm walking throughout the day, he would tug on my shoulder, just say, don't go there. Because he told me that's not there. And I think there are just little, I think I'm more aware. I keep myself aware, and I would recommend to everyone, stay more aware when it comes onto your either search for the divine or where you've been awakened by God's tap in your consciousness. Or third, stay inspired by individuals who you sense are awakened and give yourself time to embark on your awakening when it's suitable for you.
Those are all really powerful insights. And I also want to sort of ask one more question, which I've always noticed about you, is that there's a level of kind of self-inquiry that you're kind of watching your own thought patterns more so than anybody I've ever met. Like if you have even a little distortion in a thought pattern or an intention behind something, that you're working with that, you're kind of going back to the source and making sure there's a purity of thought behind actual manifestation. And maybe talk about why that is important in terms of like really cultivating this more intimate mystical relationship with the divine.
I've seen what it did for Daddy Janki, who you know of, and how she had this deep self-inquiry that was consistent in everything she did. Even when she was no longer as active as she used to be, you would be sitting in her room, Stephen, and you could see she was somewhere else on the inside. Now, I'm a social butterfly, so it's normal for me to connect to everybody and love everyone without the judgment, energy put into it. But at the same token, the divine used to teach me that everything that you're seeing in the world, everything that you're seeing in the world outside of you, there's a spiritual connection to it. And that's when I started to really deepen my spiritual inquiry, where if the dog barks and I'm feeling a resistance from the dog barking, why am I resisting that? But then I want to be clear, because any sign of resistance means there's some heaviness of something that I'm still holding on to, which doesn't give me my freedom that I so deeply, deeply desire. So I feel that I have learned honesty with myself is vital. When I first came to the Brahma Kumaris, right, I thought I was like a big deal, right? And it's like my first 2 years, and I think I'm like really super great. And I would give the course, and I would go out of the center in New York, and there'd be 2, 3, 4 people walking behind me for no reason. So, that thing kind of pumps you up. And I was nothing at the time. But I remembered sitting in the meditation room that I call Baba's room. And I told Baba, I'm not what they think. I just finished closing up my nightclubs. Why are they thinking I'm some saint? And then Baba whispered and said, don't worry. You don't have to be perfect right now, but just be honest with me and you will lead your way to perfection. And it was that sign that made me realize the importance of honesty with the self is a form of self-inquiry and self-introspection. So I highly recommend that. And don't be honest and beat yourself up. Just be honest to know it will open up another doorway for you. And then you'll enter into another space for you.
Beautifully shared. Well, Charlie, I want to bring you on. So we also have with us Charlie Hogg from Australia. He's the director of the Brahma Kumaris for Australia. He's also been a practicing meditator for 40 years. He's an author and go-to person for spiritual support. So maybe just, first of all, share a little bit about why you were drawn to participate in this book and why you think it's an important contribution for the world. And then maybe bridge a little bit into your own practice of intimacy with the divine and the unique lens that you have.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm really enjoying this conversation with you and Jenna. Yes, I was really drawn to this book because I suppose my spiritual journey has always been around moving from the theory into the experience. I grew up in Melbourne, actually, and when I was just around 20 years of age, I wandered the world for some years, mainly in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, even Africa, living in religious communities. And I loved it. I lived with all the faith traditions, but I my big question was, how do you translate all these wonderful ideas, intellectual beliefs? How do you bring it into a real feeling inside? And I've been through so many phases on my journey. I've been an atheist and I've been an agnostic because I really found, I suppose in retrospect, it's difficult to accept a lot of the religious views of God. But you know what I've found, Stephen, is that when I sit to meditate, one of my practices is to, in a sense, move out of the limited self-identity, you know, the body and all its labels, and it's a whole sort of mindset. It's a lens through which you perceive everything and become the eternal self, the soul. And it's almost, as much as I feel I'm this most incredibly subtle entity that sits in the front of the brain, that has no labels. It's not male and it's not Australian and it's not Christian. It's just an eternal self. It's almost like I feel an automatic intimacy or closeness with the Supreme Soul. It's almost like I resonate on the same frequency. You know, sometimes I look at it like when I, the soul, forget who I am and I'm very much engrossed in my limited identity. It's like I'm on the AM wavelength. God's on the FM wavelength. I know that wavelength exists, but I just can't tune in or have an intimate sense of connectedness. But I find personally, when I'm really in that soul state, the closeness to God, and I would say the feeling, the genuine feeling of a purity of love I get from nowhere else. And I would say that's my sustenance in my life, like a purity of love, a purity of that loving energy that enters the core of my being. That's what keeps me ticking, I would say. And I love to wake up in the early morning, just sort of go on that journey of letting go of the consciousness of my body, become a child, and allow myself to be absolutely loved by the divine. And I find my whole inner world just cools and calms, and I feel so content when I reach that feeling. It's a wonderful feeling.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a beautiful image of just being more of a child, just being loved by the divine, and that is the truth. But so often I think we acculturated into this, striving mentality that we have to achieve these things as sort of a exalted state that we're sort of heroically good at, versus like, we just rest and relax into it. That's a really beautiful image.
It's, I mean, you've said it so beautifully, and I could relate to what Sister Jenna was saying. I think, I think in life you sort of feel you have to be something, you have to look good, you have to impress, that, as you said, that sort of culture of life. And I felt that the more I've sort of practiced to be who I am in terms of the soul and have an intimate relationship with God, I think I've come to a sweet place where I let go of that pressure, that self-pressure, that incredible self to be something, to look good, to be noticed. It's this very, very subtle thing that, that we know how loud our ego can be in so many gross and subtle ways, but it's a freedom from my own self in a sense, a real sort of sense of freedom from a self that's craving for acceptance, respect, the acknowledgement, all that sort of stuff, which I think can be quite painful when that noisy self gets in the way of that beautiful, peaceful self. Yeah.
It's a great irony of our human condition. They're always seeking things that actually put us out of contact with what's already there.
It's so true, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like we're blind to the beauty and we become so aware of all the stuff that, it puts us out of contact with that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, Sister Jenna, I want to circle back to you. And so you really cultivated or curated this whole collection of mystics. And what did you learn from the others as you sort of brought forward their stories and their sharings, and what have you learned that applied in your own life?
Immediately, that we're not alone in our experiences and our connection to God, and whether you're Christian or Jewish or Hindu and agnostic, Buddhist, whatever, he's going to tap on you. He's going to tap in your consciousness and wake you up. It's just, what are you going to do with it afterwards? And it's very clear in the book that people from all walks of life are sharing in their stories proof that God taps in their consciousness and wakes them up, and he has absolutely no care, whatever religion you belong to. And remember, Baba, who I always call God, Baba is so big, God is so big. Who are we to squeeze him into a religion? Come on. You can't squeeze him and walk around like you're the authority of the divine, and then expect me to be convinced that you are the authority of God. So I think that with all the mystics in the book, they're proving to the world that God, Baba, belongs to everyone. Just listen. Just listen.
And that we were all, like, as Charlie said, is that we are children too, that we can receive the love of that of Baba in a way that really just nourishes us on a deep level. It's very beautiful.
I love that part, Brother Charlie, when you were sharing that the stress of just trying to thrive always and be something for someone else. And in a way, as subtle as it has such a gross representation too of where you're constantly pushing to try to, I don't know, up yourself, and then you lose sight that actually that's not even you. And perhaps one of the benefits of the pandemic is that it has awakened a lot of folks to seeing where their illusions have been fed and perhaps where they can let it go. That was really, I'm taking away that one very much, Brother Charlie. That was beautiful.
Well, part of what I'm hearing, which is appropriate to the pandemic and the book that you brought forward, is that there's a lot of letting go of old stories and patterns and belief systems that just become filters that are not necessary, that we can have a more direct and intimate relationship if we let go of a lot of the striving and the stories and even the belief systems that, as beautiful as religions have been, they've also created little boxes that divine is bigger than that. It's beautiful. Well, we just have a minute or so left here. I just want you to just share a little bit about how people can get the book, if
Sure.
there's like other steps to get involved with practice, or where do you take it from?
Sure.
Where do people take this from here?
What I'd love to see if Brother Charlie can end us with a meditation, because his meditations are so beautiful and powerful, if it's possible. If
Sure.
not, it's totally understood. But if you do want a copy of our book, Meditation, Intimate Experiences with the Divine Through Contemplative Practices, it's such a mouthful. Well, you can go to you can go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or just go to americameditating.org. But if you want to learn meditation at any of our Brahma Kumaris meditation centers, just Google brahmakumaris.org and you'll be led to a meditation center in your country and in your city, and you'll enjoy it, and it's free. So that's the best part. So thank you, Stephen, for taking the time to include us in your world and for believing in our work over the years. I've often valued and trust the intuitiveness that you carry, the sensitivity of you knowing what is true and what isn't. And so when you continue to invest in us, it, for me, continues to confirm that I think we're doing the right thing, because you can recognize the beauty in our path. So thank you. Thank you for that.
It's not that hard to look at to recognize the beauty in your path. You're just exuding peacefulness and love, and it's a blessing to be around. So thank you, Sister Jenna. And
Thank
Charlie,
you.
it's a pleasure to get to meet you. And do you want to close us out with the meditation?
Yes, I will, Stephen, and lovely to meet you too. I've really enjoyed our few minutes together. Can I just invite everyone who's with us to just sit quietly and put down devices and any distractions, and visualize the eternal self, a radiant spark of light in the center of the forehead, in the front of the brain. let me gently move into this awareness of the permanent self, the one who always is, the child of the divine. And in this sweet place, let me look through the eye of the mind and visualize the divine as a radiant jewel of light. Just hold this image in your mind, a radiant light, the ocean of love. And become just a little child in front of this divine love. And allow yourself to be completely loved. Just step away from all the self-imposed limitations of what I'm not, and just absorb this pure love into the essence of your being. This love is the greatest power in the journey of transformation. It's this love that heals me. It's this love that gives me the courage to see who I really am. It's this love that allows me to forgive and move on. Just feel the deep peace of being truly loved. This is the highest experience on the spiritual journey. If each morning I wake, I become the soul, the small child, and allow myself to be completely loved. Deep transformation will begin. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Thank you.
Thank you, beautiful souls. Thank you all for joining us, and do get this book and take in the nectar for your own heart and soul. There it is, meditation. Many blessings.
Wonderful,
Take care.
Stephen. Thank you.